Barry, you dropped your bulletin right there. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Richard, will you lead us in a word of prayer?
Father, we thank you for today, Father, this opportunity again that we have to come to worship you at this place, Father, with our family. Father, we just pray that you be with us now as we go into this time of study with Pastor. Be with him that we might have everybody recollection of all those things that he studied. Be with each one of us that we might listen, we might hear, we might look, we might take these things home, Father, and make sure that these things are so. Help us, Father, to study, to apply these things in our life, Father, so we might grow closer to you day by day. Father, we thank you for the men of the Bible that through the Holy Spirit gave us these words. We might understand more about you, your word. Understand the things that we go through. Understand, Father, the love that you have for us. Be with us again, Father. Help us, Father, to put focus this time on the Lord. All these things we ask in your Son's name.
All right. We're going to keep going in Nahum chapter 1 in our study. Just to remember, for the general context, Nahum is preaching the destruction of the Assyrians in prophecy by God. He is giving the message that Jonah wished he could give in his so far set the tone of there is none like God, which is really the base for where you begin all of this, right? Who can stand against God? The question he asks. Who's going to counsel against him? Who's going to give him wisdom? Who's going to be able to do any of the things that God is able to do? And so the point that he begins with and makes is that when God speaks and he says something, he's able to do it. There is none like God. And we get to verse 12, and he will address very quickly two particular groups, or at least one group and one individual. The first one he will talk to is Judah. He says in verse 12, "Thus saith the Lord, though they are at full strength and many, they will be cut down and pass away. Though I have afflicted you, I will afflict you no more. Now I will break his yoke off from you, and I will burst your bonds apart." And so the first part of the message he gives here is to Judah is one of hope. Although they have afflicted you, he said, I'm going to take them away. Even though they're going to come close, I'm going to cut them down. It doesn't matter how many there are. It doesn't matter how strong they are. I'm going to cut them down, and you're not going to have to worry about them. And so he begins the message by first comforting his people. Hey, even though I'm afflicting you, it's not going to last forever. And I'm going to take care of the problem here. And then he turns and directly addresses the king of Nineveh. In verse 14, he says, "The Lord has given commandment about you. No more shall your name be perpetuated. For the house of your gods I will cut off, and the carved image and the metal image I will make your grave, for you are vile." And so he talks to the king of Nineveh here. He uses this, now what we don't recognize is he changes tenses a little bit here in the Hebrew, and so we know he's talking to a different group than he was in verse 12 and 13. This is a masculine sort of singular idea that's going on, and so he's talking to an individual, which is where we get the king of Assyria, because God is going to do this to the king of Assyria. And so the word there, commandment, is a word that we probably would say, if we were to put an exact modern day thought on it, this is a judicial order. And so here the judge, God is speaking, and this is what's going to happen. And so this would be what we might say the sentencing of this king. He said his name is going to be no longer sown. That is, his descendants are not going to be anymore. And so imagine, if you would, the idea of a king, his descendants being sort of the offspring, and like a plant that sheds its seeds and scatters, and then they plant up. The same sort of idea here is that No more is his name going to be perpetuated. There's not going to be any more. They're going to end his lineage effectively. He says, from the house of your gods, I will cut off the carved in the metal images. And so he is talking about their patron gods of Assyria. And he says that they are going to be taken out of their house. He's going to cut them down. And he says that he's going to prepare his grave because he is contemptible or because he is vile. Now, the Assyrian gods that he's talking about particularly are Ashur, Nabu, Anu, Adad, and Ishtar, the goddess. And so he says all of these are contemptible, they're vile, and literally the word there in the Hebrew means light in weight. And so basically he says here, listen, I'm going to cut down all of your gods, so you think that your gods you can depend on them, you think they're going to protect you. I'm going to cut them all down, and for me, it's light work, right? They are not going to be anything compared to me. And so, it's also worth noting that he said, I will make your grave for you are vile. Back in the ancient days, where a king was laid was important, right? So whether it is a mausoleum or some other sort of marked grave or things like that, and so you have in Egypt the Valley of the Kings. You have around Israel different graves that are marked. And remember, that's one of the things that Peter says about David. He said his sepulcher is right here, and we know where it's at. And so the sepulcher of a king was important. There is a place called Herodion, which is a ruin now. It's in Israel. But in Herodion, named after Herod, is Herod's tomb. And it was on the way up. There's a family mausoleum that was off to the side. And it's been excavated and all that. And so it was this ornate thing that, really nice and all that. And so a king would make his burial place impressive. And yet what does God say here? God says, I'm going to make your grave. You're not going to get a royal mausoleum. You're not going to get some king's burial place. I'll make your grave because you're vile. And so I'm going to be the one who's going to decide what your resting place is, which again is the idea that your heritage, or excuse me, your lineage, your name, your influence, basically all those are over. I'm going to erase you off the face of the earth. They're not even going to be able to go, well, he's buried right over there, right? I'm just going to bury you, and there's no marker, there's no nothing. Basically, you're going to be gone. All right. So he gets to verse 15 and says, behold, upon the mountains, the feet of him who brings good news, who publishes peace. Keep your feast, O Judah, fulfill your vows, for never again shall the worthless pass through you. He is utterly cut off. And so he uses this, and it's very similar to Isaiah chapter 40 and verse 9. Behold, on the mountains, the feet of him who brings good news. And so the idea again here is good news coming. He is giving them this message of peace, and what it ends up being is that those, again, who are worthless will pass through you. He's utterly cut off. So basically saying, once I cut off the king of Assyria, you'll never have to worry about him again. He is going to be completely gone, which is exactly what happens. If you'll remember, the Assyrian king they besiege Israel, or Judah, Jerusalem, let me get it right. They besiege Jerusalem. It seems like they're going to win, and then God comes through and strikes a bunch of them down. They retreat and they go back, and history tells us that his sons kill him in their capital city, and then they end up being slaughtered because of it, and basically the Assyrian Empire from that point on is on a downward trajectory until the Babylonians come in and completely take care of them. So, all right. And then he gets to, in chapter 2, some of you might see in your subtitles, the destruction of Nineveh. Nineveh is the capital city. It is the shining sort of city of the Assyrian Empire. It stands for all of the empire, and so we might look at it as if this happens to Nineveh, this is describing the entire nation, right? This is the heart and soul of who they are, and it was the place that they would identify with as being that heart and soul. And I would say kind of like Jerusalem is for those who are Jewish, right? Jerusalem is the heart of Israel. And so he says he's going to give this destruction of Nineveh, and he uses some pretty descriptive words here to talk about how much the destruction is going to be. And so he said, the scatterer has come up against you, man the ramparts, watch the road, dress for battle, collect all your strength. And so in verse 1, he calls them to battle. Nahum tells them, get ready because the wrath of God is coming. And so the word scatterer, which is in my English Standard, can also be translated shatterer, the one who shatters things into pieces. He dashes them into pieces. And so the idea here is not that he's just going to kind of scatter them around, but that he is going to break them into tiny little pieces so that they can't be put back together, right? My youngest daughter likes to take things that have been scattered and organize them. She organizes things, and so she will take different colored beads, and so that, like to her, that's wonderful, right? Having different colored beads that she can put and organize into colors and things. She loves that. That's not what this is, right? You would think, well, even if it's scattered, you could come back and you could put it together. What he's talking about is something that's broken into so many pieces, there's just no fixing it, right? So, the one who does that is coming against you, and he's calling God that, and so he tells him, hey man, get ready. Make preparations for battles. And so he tells them, the Lord is restoring the majesty of Jacob and the majesty of Israel, for plunderers have plundered them and ruined their branches. Interestingly enough, he uses the idea of Jacob, which is an allusion to the 12 tribes here. He says, I'm going to restore the splendor of Jacob, even though Assyria will come in and they will, at some point, decimate the northern kingdom. That territory comes back, and the Lord restores that. And so, even though we might say, well, yeah, it's true that he comes in and he takes the land, eventually he has to withdraw and that land returns to God's people. Okay, and so he said, the shield of his mighty men is red. His soldiers are clothed in scarlet. The chariots come with flashing metal. The day he musters them, the cypress spears are brandished. The chariots race madly through the streets, and they rush through the squares. They gleam like torches. They dart like lightning. He remembers his officers. They stumble as they go. They hasten to the wall. The siege tower is set up. The river gates are open. The palace melts away. His mistress is stripped. She's carried off. Her slave girls lamenting, moaning like doves and beating their breasts. Nineveh is like a pool whose waters run away. Halt, halt, they cry, but none turns back. Plunder the silver, plunder the gold. There is no end of the treasure or the wealth of all precious things. And so here we find, here's a interesting note. He talks about these soldiers being clothed in scarlet and carrying red shields. Now, here's what we know. That the men of Babylon, the Chaldean soldiers, wore red. And so in Ezekiel chapter 23 and verse 14, it says, she saw men portrayed on the wall, the images of the Chaldeans portrayed in vermilion, which is a type of red. And so here we find this picture, and the description that's given is of soldiers dressed in red with red shields running through the town, causing all kinds of destruction, and that's exactly what happens when the Babylonians ransack Nineveh. Okay, and so he talks about them, and he says, you look at the description that's given of them, they are everything is ready to go. Their chariots are metal, and they're flashing in the light, and their spears are ready, and they're sharpened, and they're ready to go. And then in verse 4 it says they go through the streets quickly. And then the visual that's given is they gleam like torches and dart like lightning. And so imagine the light bouncing off of a metal object. And the picture that's given here is they're moving so fast through the city, it's like lightning going past, that gleam coming off of them as they go past and all that. And so the picture that's being painted here is they have completely overtaken the city. It says he remembers his officers, and they stumble as they go. He remembers his nobles, which I think most commentators think this is a allusion to the king of Nineveh. And so the idea is, here they are, they're running through the streets, they're going fast up and down, and the Ninevites are basically stumbling all over the place. They are shocked. They can't organize and get together. They're in complete disarray. And so he says the river gates are open and the palace melts away. Again, that's just the idea of things are no longer contained that were once contained. Everything has just been turned upside down. Verse 7 and 8, he takes away their hope. The people have given up. Here is even the most, what we might say, the most precious of things, and those resources are being carried away. And so I think a lot of people also look at this and the idea of a mistress being like a particular individual. You can also read this as the mistress is the city itself. And so the city itself is being plundered. It's being stripped and carried off, and everyone is upset about it. They are crying. And so he gets to that. In verse 8, talks about Nineveh is like a pool whose waters run away. And so where there was once sort of lushness and opulence, all of that's gone. And so you can imagine, I mean, we've seen it, right? Here in Central Texas, in times of drought, when the stock ponds dry up and the rivers go down and stuff like that, how dry it gets and how barren it is. And so that's sort of the idea that's being talked about here. And they ask for it to stop in verse 8, but it just keeps coming. And so they go through and it says they plunder the city. They take everything of value from it. There is no end of the treasure or all the wealth of precious things. And so they are just going through and they are gathering the spoils of war in such a way that they're leaving Nineveh absolutely empty, right? There's nothing left. And so he gets into verse 10. It says, desolate, desolate, and ruin. Hearts melt and knees tremble. Anguish is in all loins. All faces grow pale. Where is the lion's den, the feeding place of the young lions? Where are the lion and lionesses went? Where his cubs were, with none to disturb. The lion tore enough for his cubs and strangled prey for his lioness. He filled his caves with prey and his dens with the thorn. And so he ends up here. The destruction of Nineveh is so complete. He asked, where is the lion's den? Now, here's the thing. When they go through and when they find what's left of Nineveh, and they excavate everything, they don't understand how complete the destruction is. Usually when you excavate a place, there are things that are left behind that you can find. There was absolutely nothing in the ruins of Nineveh. Like it's all gone. The things that you would expect to find there are absolutely gone. Here is the idea of a lion who is strong. And there are two ways I think we could take this. We can look at it and say that Nineveh was a lion They were vicious and fierce, and now they're not, right? They're gone. There's nothing there for them. The other thing we can look at here is that for Babylon, one of their great symbols is a lion. On the Ishtar gates, which is an archaeological find, big blue gates, if you've ever seen a picture of them, they're mosaic. But one of the mosaics on the side is a lion with the head of the king on it, right? And so the idea could be here is that the lions that they once were has been replaced by a larger lion. And he has come in and he's taken over. So he says in verse 13, "Behold, I'm against you, declares the Lord of hosts, and I will burn your chariots in smoke. Your sword the sword shall devour your young lions. I will cut off your prey from the earth, and the voice of your messengers shall no longer be heard." So again, I think looking at this is in verse 13. This is the culmination of everything that he's just said. And so if we were going to take chapter 2 and we're going to break it down into one sentence, we might choose verse 13 as that one sentence, right? I am against you, declares the Lord of hosts. And again, we saw that in Isaiah, right? When he uses that term Lord of hosts, he's talking about his strength, his might, the Lord of armies, right? And so he says, I'm against you. I'm the Lord of armies, and I'm going to destroy everything. I'm going to burn your chariots. We're going to get cut down with the sword. You are not going to be after anybody. You have no more prey, and your messengers shall be no longer be heard. Now, one of the interesting things about this is the idea of the messengers no longer being heard is Assyria had a strategy of they would use what we would call mental warfare, right? So we see that when Hezekiah is king. You remember what happens? The Rabshakeh is his name. He comes to the city, and he begins to shout aloud, we're going to tear down all this, and we're going to defeat your God. We defeated all these other gods, and yours is just going to fall just like that. And at one point, it's so bad that a Hebrew or Israel or Judah envoy goes out and asks him, hey, don't speak in the language that you're speaking in because people can understand you. Speak in the different language and let's talk and let's talk this through. And so he would basically, Assyria would show up and they would start the messaging already of, you guys are dead. We're fixing to come in and we're going to, if you don't bend to what we want, we're just going to completely destroy everything, and we've done it and we have a history of doing it. And so they would come in and they would send a messenger, the Rabshakeh, which was a title, and the Rabshakeh would do that. He would give out the message of destruction before, just to start the panic of the people, right? And so he says here, the voice of your messengers are not going to be heard anymore. Which, again, that's exactly what they would do, but there's also worth noting that God is doing exactly what they did. He's telling them beforehand, I'm going to come in, I'm going to wipe you off the face of the earth. I'm going to destroy everything. Your gold is going to be gone. Your people are going to be gone. Your legacy is going. Everything's wiped off. So he's doing to the Assyrians what the Assyrians did to everybody else, and then saying in the process, and your messengers that would basically give the same message. I mean, they're cut off. They're not going to be heard anymore. No one is going to fear Assyria. That strategy is not going to work, and so. He gives them complete destruction. Now, if let's just say for a second, you're Nineveh, and you listen to this message, and you would say to yourself, well, why is he so mad? Like, what in the world, what is going on? God does not leave them with questions. And in fact, chapter 3 is what they did to deserve this, right? And so we see God, basically so far, if we can break down the chapters, God says, I am big enough to do what I'm about to say. Chapter 2 is, I'm going to completely destroy you and cut you off. And chapter 3 is, and here's why. This is what you've done to cause this. And so he says, woe to the bloody city in chapter 3, verse 1. All are full of lies and plunder, no end to the prey, the crack of the whip, the rumble of the wheel, the galloping horses, the bounding chariot, horsemen charging, flashing sword and glittering spear, hosts of slain, heads of corpses, dead bodies without end. They stumble over the bodies. For all the countless whoring of the prostitute, graceful and of deadly charms, who betrays the nations with her whorings and the people with her charms. And so he talks to them and he says, number one, you are a bloody city. So as we've already pointed out, the Assyrians, they built an empire on massive violence, right? You can look at like the Medes and the Persians, and they would come in and basically, and even the Romans, and basically say, listen, if you just behave and pay your taxes, we're fine, right? Not the Assyrians. The Assyrians, they would slaughter first and ask questions later. And so he says, you're a bloody city. And then he paints them as, sort of void of any real morals. She would break covenants. She's full of lies. She would pillage, is robbery with open knowledge of it. Like it's going in. Her prey never departs means Nineveh never grew tired of plundering others. In verse 2, we have this vivid description of warfare. The whips cracking for the horses to go faster, the rattling of chariot wheels and all of that. And so you could imagine the noise that made as it approached. All those horses pulling those metal boxes and people yelling and all that kind of thing. And so he gets to it in verse 3 and he says, here's hosts of slain, heaps of corpses, dead bodies without end. They stumble over the bodies. And so he describes them as just being so violent that they are stumbling over dead bodies, right? They are heaps of corpses. They put heads of hosts on pikes and things like that to show people, remember, and they would flay kings and put them on the walls for people to see it. He says in verse 5, behold, I am against you, declares the Lord of hosts, and I will lift up your skirts, and I will make the nations look at your nakedness, the kingdoms at your shame. I will throw filth at you and treat you with contempt and make you a spectacle. And all who look on you will shrink from you and say, wasted is Nineveh, who will grieve for her? Where shall I seek comforters for you? And so in verse 6, he talks about embarrassing them. And so basically, he is, for lack of a better term, he is mocking their manhood and bringing shame to them. And he is throwing refuse at them. And so not only are they shamed in that way, but they are covered with things that are unpleasant, to say the least. He says, I will make you a spectacle. And so I'm going to embarrass you so bad that you are going to be a spectacle for others. And like you have embarrassed other kings, and you have displayed them, and you have done all these terrible things to these people that you've conquered, I'm going to do the same for you. I'm going to put your shame on display for others to see. And so he says, everyone who looks at you will shrink from you. And so the idea being is that people are going to want nothing to do with you, right? And so imagine, if you would, the playground bully. And, when the playground bully's around, everyone's trying to be his friend, right? Or her friend. I don't want to, And so they're trying to be the playground bully's friend, even if they don't like them. Because they think if I'm on their side, then they're not taking their bullying out on me, right? Yet here is a situation in which they are so humiliated that everyone is turning on them. Like, oh, I don't want to have anything to do with those people, right? I don't want to be associated with them. I don't want them to think that we are connected. And then he asked the question, Wasted is Nineveh, who will grieve for her? Where shall I seek comforters for you? And so the question is really one of, I think there's a philosophical question in here. Because he's asking Nineveh, you've been so terrible to everybody, and you're so vile, that when your downfall comes, no one is going to mourn you, right? No one is going to get around and go, oh man, like, that's terrible that Nineveh got treated that way, or I'm going to miss them. He says, no one's going to grieve you. No one's going to care that you're gone. And no one's going to come to your side and try to comfort you in your lowest point. Which then, I think looking at this, we see what God is saying to the nation, but there's also kind of a personal thing in this, right? Ask yourself that question. When I'm gone, who's going to grieve for me? And it's really a question of how we treat others, right? He's asking this question because Nineveh had treated everyone vile. And because of that, when their downfall came, nobody wanted to be close to them. And so the idea being is that when we pass away, what do we leave? Have we influenced those around us in such a way that they would grieve us going, that it's a loss in the lives of those around us? Or is it going to be one of those things where they go, oh, hey, did you hear Patrick died? And somebody goes, oh, really? Okay. And they just go on with them for good. And that if we're gone, people feel a hole where we once were, right? We want to reflect God's graciousness and His mercy and His kindness in such a way that people will recognize when we're not there and be a little sad about it, okay? But that's the principles here, is that they hadn't been that, and so when they get to their end, everybody's like, okay. You know, like we're not going to shed a tear over that. And so, real quick, he gets to verse 8, who sat by the Nile with water around her, her rampart, a sea, and water her wall. Cush was her strength, Egypt too, that without limit, that put the Libyans, and the Libyans were her helpers. And so he talks about other great cities that have fallen. The first one here is the city of Thebes. The Egyptian city of Thebes was destroyed by Ashurbanipal in 663 BC. And when it happened, the Assyrians gloated over it. You know, they are happy about it. He gets in verse 9. Cush was her strength, Egypt too, and without limit were her helpers. And so Ethiopia was at her southern border, Egypt at the northern border of Cush. But here we find that they are still taken down. The city had powerful borders and powerful help around them, and yet the Assyrians destroyed the city, right? And took great joy in it. It says in verse 18, yet she became an exile, she went into captivity, her infants were dashed to pieces at the head of every street. For her honored men, lots were cast, and all of her great men were bound in chains. You also will be drunken. You will go into hiding. You will seek refuge from the enemy. All your fortresses are like fig trees with first ripe figs. If shaken, they fall into the mouth of the eater. Behold, your troops are women in your midst. The gates, your land, are open to your enemies, and the fire has devoured your bars. And so he says, listen, here were these great cities, and they fell, and you're going to fall in the same way. And the description that he gives here is again, it falls right in line with what he's said this whole time. They are going to be drunken, like people who can't walk and they're stumbling. They are hidden, which is a word that means brought to nothing. And he says, you will seek refuge from the enemy. They're going to look for a place, and yet, in spite of all of their efforts, their fortresses, their strongholds are going to be like ripened fig trees where the fruit is just falling off for it to be consumed. And so it is easy to collect the spoil, so to speak. And then in verse 13, he takes a shot at him, right? And this is not me being sexist. I'm just reading what the Bible says. Behold, your troops are like women in your midst. Now, let's be honest. I'm going to say something that will get me in trouble on Twitter. Men are stronger than women in the general sense. That's not to say there aren't some women in this world that could beat me up. I completely, but for the grand majority, I think I could hold my own, right? And so the idea here, he says, your troops, those who you are thinking are strong, these vicious warriors, they're going to be like you put out a bunch of women to fight in battle. That's what it's going to be like. And so he's calling them weak, and he says, your gates of your land are wide open to your enemies, and all the defenses are torn down or open. And so he tells them, everything that you hope that is going to give you strength is going to be taken away. Just like you might look at Thebes and say, okay, we got the water on one side, we've got all these countries that surround us that are strong, we're in good shape, we've got all this, and yet you were able to overcome them. Whatever things that you can put around you to say, hey, we're strong and we're protected, I'm going to take those away too, just like you did. And so don't be so prideful into thinking that you can't be taken down, because you can. Okay, we'll get into the next part in verse 14 next week and keep going on the Assyrians here, and we'll keep describing their doom. All right, thanks, guys. Hey, don't. Isaiah 53. Yeah. From the Jewish perspective, it's not. No, you are interpreting it the same way Jesus and many of the apostles did, because they quote it and use it, and so it's actually in a. Am my mic still on? Yeah.